Hello, and welcome back to True Story. Thank you for being here, and for taking a moment to listen. Some stories are hard to tell, but even harder to forget. Have you ever had someone sit in front of your children, in a house they believe is theirs, and calmly tell them that you are a failure? Because that is exactly what happened to me. It was a quiet afternoon on Magnolia Lane. The kind of afternoon where the light feels soft, almost peaceful. Aunt Lorraine was sitting in her living room, pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups, smiling as if everything in her world was perfectly in place. Then she looked at my daughter and said something that changed everything. Your mother spent her whole life chasing dreams and ended up with nothing. Don't become like her. At first, it might sound like just another harsh opinion. Families say things they shouldn't sometimes, right? But the way she said it, calm, certain, almost proud, that was different. And what made it worse was that my children believed her. But that was not the worst part. That evening, when Ethan and Lily came home, their eyes were red, their voices shaking, I realized something had broken. "Mum, is it true?" Ethan asked me. "Did you really waste your life?" I held them close, telling them that some people speak without understanding. But even as I said those words, another question kept growing in my mind. Why would Lorraine say something like that? And more importantly, why did she feel so comfortable saying it in that house? You see, that house on Magnolia Lane is not just any house. The walls are old, the air carries a quiet weight, and every room holds memories that were never meant to surface again. I had spent years ignoring her words, years choosing silence over conflict. I told myself it did not matter, that it was easier this way. But something about that day felt different. Because this time, she did not come for me. She came for my children. And that was a line she should never have crossed. So I walked into my office, closed the door behind me, and picked up the phone. My hand was steady. My voice even steadier. "The tenant at 78 Magnolia Lane, her lease will not be renewed. 60 days. There was a pause on the other end. Confusion. Hesitation. But I did not explain. Because the truth was something Lorraine had never even considered. For 8 years, the woman who called me a failure had been living under a roof that only existed because of me. I thought I had already learned how to ignore Lorraine. For years, I told myself her words did not matter. But if that were true, why did they still echo in my head? Because the truth is, she had been shaping my story long before that afternoon. And, what I understood later, made everything worse. Lorraine believed life was a calculation. The right marriage, the right money, the right image. If you followed those rules, you were worthy. If you did not, you were a mistake. My mother chose love instead. And from that moment on, Lorraine treated her like a warning sign. You might think that kind of judgment fades with time. It does not. It settles in and grows. When my parents died, I was 16. One moment, I had a home. The next, I was standing in Lorraine's house, trying to understand where I belonged. She took me in, yes, but not without reminding me. "You are here because you have nowhere else to go." She never shouted. That was what made it worse. She spoke like everything she said was simply the truth. And slowly, I started to believe it. But that was not the worst part. Nights in that house were different. The floors creaked. The air felt heavy. Sometimes I would lie awake and hear her voice drifting through the hallway, listing every poor decision my parents had made. It felt like I was living inside someone else's judgment. So I learned to stay quiet, to take up less space, to disappear. But there was one thing I never gave up: my father's camera. It was the only thing that made me feel seen. Lorraine called it useless, a hobby for people who had no future. I never argued, but I never stopped either. And here is what I did not understand back then. Every time she tried to make me smaller, she was pushing me somewhere else, somewhere she could not follow. And when I finally walked out of that house at 18, I made a choice: not to fight her, not to prove anything, but to build something quietly. What I did not realize at the time was how that quiet decision would change everything. I did not become successful overnight. It happened slowly, in ways Lorraine would never have noticed. At first, it was just survival: long shifts, little sleep, saving whatever I could. But then, something unexpected happened. A client could not pay me in cash. Instead, she offered me something unusual: a small share in a property she was renovating. It sounded risky. It sounded uncertain. So why did I say yes? That decision changed everything. I started learning real estate the hard way: repairs that went over budget, tenants who disappeared without warning, deals that almost collapsed at the last minute. There was one moment I nearly lost everything. I stood alone in an empty house, wondering if Lorraine had been right about me all along. But I did not stop. One property became two, two became five, and slowly I built something stable, something real. But Lorraine never knew. She still believed I was barely getting by, and I let her believe it, because what she thought had stopped mattering. Then one day, something appeared that I could not ignore: an address I knew too well: 78 Magnolia Lane. Her house. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, but it was not. The debt had grown, the payments had failed, and quietly, the house was going into foreclosure. No one in the family knew, not even Lorraine. So I had a choice: walk away or step in. I bought it, not under my name, not in any way she could trace, through a company, distant, invisible. And then I made a decision that would change everything. I let her stay. Month after month, she paid rent. She complained. She judged. She dismissed me, never once realizing who she was really paying. For 8 years, and I might have let it continue forever, if she had not crossed one line, the only line I would never allow anyone to cross. The dinner ended quietly, but nothing about that night felt the same. No one returned to their normal conversations. No one laughed the way they usually did. It was as if something invisible had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Lorraine did not argue. She did not defend herself. She just sat there, staring at the documents, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, she looked uncertain, and that was something I had never seen before. In that moment, I understood something I had not fully realized until then. This was never about proving her wrong. It was not about winning. It was about finally being seen, clearly, without her version of the story standing in the way. Because for years, she had defined me with her words, and I had allowed it by saying nothing. But that silence was over. Lorraine moved out within the 60 days. A smaller apartment, across town. No grand rooms, no polished image, just something real. We still see each other sometimes. Family gatherings do not stop. But the way she looks at me now is different. She no longer offers advice. She no longer measures my choices. Sometimes she says nothing at all. And strangely, that silence feels lighter than her words ever did. My children changed too. They do not ask if I failed anymore. They do not question who I am. Instead, they watch me in a different way, as if they are learning something without needing it explained. And maybe that is the part that matters most, because not every truth needs to be spoken out loud. Some truths settle in quietly and stay. As for Lorraine, I do not know if she truly changed, or if she simply lost the certainty she once held so tightly. But maybe that is enough, because sometimes people do not need to be confronted again. They just need to face the truth once and carry it with them. Thank you for listening and for staying with me through this story, because even now, I still find myself wondering if that night was truly an ending or the beginning of something neither of us fully understands yet.